Overnight low of 61, calm wind. Monday's weather, a 30% chance of a shower, mostly cloudy, high near 78. Monday night, 80% chance of showers and thunderstorms, overnight low of 68. Tuesday, 80% chance of more showers and thunderstorms. Some storms could produce heavy rain, high of 83. Wednesday, partly sunny and 80. Thursday, sunshine and 84. Friday, sunshine and 83. Saturday, mostly sunny, 84.
ON Radio.
Welcome to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
What happens when people have alien abduction experiences and then their furniture starts flying around the house? Where can experiencers find help? What is the Mutual UFO Network?
Hello, and welcome to the 1008th edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno, coming to you from WOON AM and FM radio in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, on the Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live, and on YouTube. I'm Ben, and that was Paul. And today, we bring you a distinguished guest on an unusual approach to an old subject. Earl Grey Anderson is the Mutual UFO Network's State Director for Southern California and is MUFON's chief investigator there as well. He appears regularly in the media, including the Travel Channel's Storming Area 51 special and on the lecture circuit. He serves as MUFON's star team and experiencer resource team. Earl is also a composer and recording artist based in Los Angeles, half of the Piper Gray artistic duo. Two of Earl's songs appear in the indie Australian film Gascoigne, directed by Peter McGinnis.
Earl Grey Anderson, welcome back to Behind the Paranormal.
Hi there, you guys. I have to get you an updated bio. I'm no longer chief investigator. I'm state director, and I have a new chief investigator that I assigned, that title to, Gino Marigolano.
Oh, okay.
Well, fair enough. Now we know. So,
Yeah.
So I guess speaking of MUFON, what is the Mutual UFO Network for those who do not know?
We are the oldest private UFO investigatory group in the world. When the Air Force closed the doors on Project Blue Book, their official investigation of UFOs, or so-called official investigation into UFOs, we think it was more them trying to shuffle the whole thing under the really, in retrospect. But in 1969, they closed their doors and MUFON opened theirs. It's the Mutual UFO Network. Started as the Midwest UFO Network. And then we wound up going nationwide and now worldwide as well. We have representatives in Britain and England and in Canada, all around the world. So anyway, the way that MUFON works is that if you go to MUFON.com, if you've seen a UFO or you have had an anomalous experience with an anomalous entity, which we can talk about a little bit, if you go to MUFON.com, it gives you a choice to report a UFO or report an entity sighting. You can go and click on either of those buttons, and it will allow you to write out what happened, where it happened, when it happened. And someone like myself or one of my team members will be assigned that case. We'll call you, we'll talk with you, and we'll investigate your case scientifically as possible. You can't really use the scientific method per se with ufology because you can't really repeat an experiment. You can't snap your fingers and cause a UFO to reappear. But taking all the criteria and just all the various, we look for markers from case to case to case. Anyway, it's kind of what MUFON does.
Okay. We are not joiners, But I have to say that having been very impressed with MUFON for many years, I joined it many years ago. And most recently, of course, in the last few years, have been honored to been asked to serve on the Experience Resource Team, as you do. So what is the ERT and how does it help people?
I think of the ERT as kind of MUFON's compassionate wing. We're not there so much to investigate people's experiences as we are there to listen. We're unjudgmental listeners. And we have resources for people. There are support groups for those who have had anomalous contact because people can get PTSD. There's Dr. John Mack, who was a Harvard scientist, spoke of it as ontological shock, when reality is kind of pulled out from under you like a rug, and you're sort of left there with nothing to grab onto. In the Experiencer Resource Team, we're all experts in this field, and we've worked many cases like this. It's nothing new, not new ground to us. And we've heard everything. And this phenomena runs the gamut. It's very, very strange. And you can find help there. And it's the same thing. If you go to MUFON.com and you click on report an entity, it will take you to a questionnaire where you'll fill out 30 questions and write a narrative of what you've experienced. And someone will call you back. We'll get a hold of you, and we're very good at what we do, and you will be believed. First of all, we're non-judgmental. That's because this what I found in this phenomena is that sometimes it has intentional absurdity built right into it. It's almost like a signature line. So somebody, like, for instance, I had a case where these two, now adults, but as children, they saw orbs, and then they came up to their window and they looked like happy faces, have a nice day from the 1970s. and this happened 2 nights in a row, and the young girl had a lung ailment that was going to eventually be fatal for her. And she was actually healed by these kind of ridiculous looking orbs with, happy faces on them. But, I think that the phenomenon, it kind of finds where people's comfort level is sometimes, or it appears to people in a way that perhaps wouldn't shock them, or sometimes it intentionally shocks people to wake them up, I think.
Yeah, certainly true. Now, one of the reasons that I'm on the ERT is to consult on what are known as crossover phenomena. Things like we mentioned in the beginning, someone will have an abduction experience, and all of a sudden there's poltergeist phenomena going on, and there's things not usually associated with traditional UFO or ET experiences. So Denise Stoner and I, we will look at cases that come into that regard. How common is it in your experience, Earl, to have a crossover phenomena?
Very, very common. It's very common.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been, and this sort of thing's been happening for years and years. I mean, my friend, Dr. Irena Scott, she's an author and a ufologist, has written a couple of books about the Pascagoula case.
Yeah.
But she and her sister had an encounter, I believe it was in the late 60s or early 70s. And they experienced missing time. It started out with seeing a craft. Irena actually ran up to the top of a hill with a camera to get a picture of this craft because it had windows, and she thought that she actually could see beings behind the windows of this thing. It looked a lot like the Betty and Barney Hill craft that they saw. Kind of like a large disc with this great observation window kind of wrapped around the whole thing. She ran up to the top of the hill, and then she couldn't remember anything for a half an hour, and she thinks that perhaps she was either taken or visited or something. She said that when she got home, the first thing that happened, she walked into the bathroom and the electric toothbrush flew across the room and hit the wall, which we usually associate with poltergeist activity. It's kind of the, yeah. I'm not sure exactly why this happens, but I do think that they use portal technology or something, and it opens a door to other stuff. Maybe it has something to do with that, or it's just something we don't understand. But yeah, there is, there's paranormal-like activity that people experience after having an abduction or a visitation. Very, very common.
One recent development in MUFON that it kind of affected me was that the word paranormal is kind of a no-no. And, I get that. There is such baggage and nonsense associated with that word. People turn on the TV and, dish falls off the table, everybody screams and runs out. That is not scientific, it's not systematic. So I get that. I prefer the word high strangeness, the term, and other things that can be applied to these crossover phenomena that are more serious in their intent. Ben, you want to jump in here?
Yes. I'm sorry, I'm just jotting down some notes. I really like this term that you brought up, taking a quick half step back, intentional absurdity. I think that's a really interesting way of putting it, especially when it comes to anything really in sort of, we just said paranormal is a no-no word, but we're going to use it now.
It's semantics. What we use with MUFON oftentimes, and I got this okayed by our director of investigations, Steve Hudgens, is you just hyphenate the word paranormal with paranormal-like.
Okay.
Paranormal-like.
There you go.
I'll take it.
And that is perfectly okay. I asked him if that was okay, and he said head of the class, Earl, head of the class. So I think that the whole thing is that they're currently meeting with Congress in a secured room in Washington, D.C. quarterly now. MUFON is. They're presenting cases. And if something appears in there that's reminiscent of National Enquirer fare, for instance,
right,
perhaps they won't take it as seriously. So it's just, watching the way that you notate things. That's all.
No, that actually kind of is leading me in the direction I was heading in, because that does bring up an interesting point, this intentional absurdity, right? Where arguably, right? So let's say that all of these creatures, beings, entities, whatever, they're completely other, right? Something that's entirely separate from our human experience, which is in itself important. But the problem that I think that everybody runs into in this field is how it's experienced and interpreted, because it's so outside the purview of what we understand. It does come across as absurdism, right? And and it comes across in such a way that it's very hard to explain these things to people. If we, explaining that there were these weird, goofy 70s-esque, smiley faces that came and looked in somebody's window and then healed them. It's like you bring that to Congress, what are they going to say about that, right? Like,
I imagine that case wasn't presented to Congress.
No, I can imagine that it isn't.
Oh.
But it's these weird things, right? That seem like they're not the norm, but in a sense it kind of is, in a backwards way. So by looking at these experiences and kind of breaking them down, they all kind of fit these molds, these symbols that have kind of been throughout human history. And I think that's the hard part in this whole understanding the experience portion of it. Because I've been trying to contend for the last couple of years or so that the problem with the paranormal isn't so much a scientific or philosophical one, it's a phenomenological one. Because how we experience something is very different than how somebody else would experience it, depending on our background and how we understand it. So with all that being said, right, with all this crossover phenomena, how is MUFON attempting to interpret it, or are they just attempting to catalog it?
That's a good question. Well, I know that I look for markers from case to case to case. So in a way, we do catalog things because, for instance, I have many cases where the military seems to have a bit more aggressive encounters than civilians do. You know, that with civilians, it's usually they'll see a UFO, or even if they have an abduction or a visitation, it's usually, you know, there's a calming message given to them. It's going to be okay. Don't worry. We're going to, you know, this will be over soon. We're not going to harm you. But I notice with military, sometimes it's almost as though they're trying to understand their motives, or maybe get us to understand our own motives. I think that, you know, it's the dichotomy of the human experience, where we can write love sonnets, beautiful music and symphonies, and then we can kill each other in mass in war, you know?
It's true.
And I think that we're probably a concern to whatever this intelligence is. Now, I tend to lean more towards this being primarily an interdimensional phenomenon. I think that some of it may be interstellar. Some of it may be us from the future or from the far distant past is possible as well. But it seems to me we see, I've seen from case to case, and even, you know, I had a weird anomalous experience where what seemed to happen was a portal seemed to open up in my room, for lack of better description. Maybe I should say a portal-like.
See, now we're getting the hang of it.
yeah, there you go. And so I think that when you open up, if it's possible for things to pass from dimension to dimension, and physicists are saying now, you know, they're talking about there being 9 different dimensions. I kind of think the universe is more like a Mandelbrot fractal, where it just has tributaries and goes on forever and ever, and maybe all, you know, we have worlds that are almost like our own, but slight changes here, and it just keeps going on and on, perhaps. And if something comes through, it's no wonder if you open up a door to another world, other stuff may come through as well. You know, a big hairy creature that beats tree trunks into each other, you know, standing next to a UFO, you know. And that's the other, you know, it's like they want us to use scientific language, so you don't use the word Bigfoot, you just describe the creature. Because you're not going to find Bigfoot in your encyclopedia, or not, at least not under, you know, accepted creatures that live in this world. So you describe it. I mean, I was a nurse for many years, and as a nurse, you're not allowed to diagnose. What you do is tabulate symptoms, and you notate those. You don't say patient came in, you know, presenting measles. You just write down the description of the symptoms, and any doctor worth his weight, you know, in whatever, is going to read that, and he's going to know what you're talking about. And so I think that's kind of the way that we do it as well.
So I guess in that, you know, in that sort of vein, what are the common symptoms, if there are any commonalities, between any of these crossover cases?
Well, the poltergeist like activity is a good one. Years ago, I had a girlfriend who had a UFO encounter when she was a little girl, and I knew about that. And she had experienced missing time. This was when she was maybe like 10 years old. And she had these weird episodes where she was visited by these creatures. Now, I thought that what was going on, at first I thought it was just sleep paralysis, but she wasn't paralyzed always, you know. It didn't really have all the signatures of that. And this is, you know, back before I really understood the UFO phenomenon. But what I noticed was when she would have these visitations, that poltergeist activity would happen in her house. And I thought that it was possibly that she had a haunting or some ill, you know, some spirit with, you know, some malevolence in it. But I spoke with her recently, and I said, you know, I was thinking, you know, because you had that missing time experience when you were a little girl, and you had these entities visiting you. I'm starting to think that we even though it doesn't hurt to burn sage in the house and stuff, I'm starting to think that perhaps that wasn't poltergeist that you had. I think that when we watched we would watch the TV turn on by itself and the lights flicker and it just the usual spooky stuff that you hear about in hauntings. I saw a painting that I did for her fly like 7 feet. It flew off the wall, and it wasn't an earth tremor or anything like that. So yeah, those are all like kind of people report that sort of thing.
Well, one of the things is we're always griping about is that we put labels on things that we can understand, and it might not reflect what's actually going on.
Yes.
For example, possible example, in the ERT, we communicate all the time. We meet once a month, and in a recent communication, one of the members sent a photo of marks on someone's body in a case he was dealing with. And I came late to the conversation, but I mentioned, you must have perceived this too, that I have found that marks on people's bodies in poltergeist cases very often will match, not always, but will match some of the marks that we see in the abduction cases. And I've sat down with Bud Hopkins on that at one point, and Kathy Martin and I have discussed it at length. So the question is, what's really happening here? What are these things? Now MUFON has a very thorough reporting system, as you mentioned, Earl, and I think that there's no time limit on it. So I was going to mention the 1974 encounter in Bridgeport, in which I consider these poltergeists to be aliens. That is exactly how they came across. So I may hit the entity button there and report that. So,
well, how would you describe something like the Hopkinsville
I
case?
know, it's amazing.
They're like the
Why
little
don't you tell us about that?
Well, it was pretty much this family. They were invaded by these little tiny creatures that looked sort of like gargoyles. They had big pointed ears, and the police were called out. And I mean, other people apparently had seen it. The whole family. They weren't drunk.
1951, I believe, or 55.
Yeah, and they were shooting at these things, and it seemed like bullets didn't affect them. There was one that was up by the door, and the guy opened the door and shot it like point blank, and it flipped over almost like in a video game.
Yeah.
And it was fun, it was there. It was, and I mean, it's so absurd. But this was one of Dr. J. Allen Hynek's favorite cases because it was just so strange.
Oh, it's one of ours too. We've had Geraldine Stith on the show many times about this. She's the daughter of the family that experienced that, as you know. So amazing case, and every case seems to be unique in one or more of its characteristics.
Absurdity to it. I mean, it's absurd. One way the way the town tried to describe, they tried to make the case go away was they said, well, we think it was monkeys that got away from the circus.
Yeah, right. There was no circus. One of the things too is that I really believe that what we get out of an experience like that depends on what we bring to it. The military brings guns.
Yeah.
And then the experiences I've had generally tend to be, except for poltergeists or parasites as we call them, tend to be very positive. My Bigfoot encounter in 2016 came after I had meditated and put myself in a spiritual state, and it was a privilege to have that experience. A little girl came upon the same entity in broad daylight or something that seemed like it, and is so terrified she hasn't talked to us to this day. So I think we bring to it pretty much what we
Yes.
get out of it.
So much so. So much so.
Can you tell us about some more cases?
Sure. Well, I had one case where this gentleman, he was a Marine. I thought you might want to talk about some of this stuff.
Sure.
So I even had the case loaded up, or I did. Hold on one second.
Well, I'll tell you what.
here we go.
We do have our break coming up, so we can give you a little bit of time to prepare quickly.
Okay.
But sure, you can go to break if you want. It's a good case. I've got two cases that are almost the same, but one, it was the guy's, the scariest thing he ever had happen to him, and for the other guy, it was the positive thing that ever happened for him.
Ooh, then
Very
I guess
good.
we'll take our break real quickly, and then
Okay,
we can
you're,
hop right into that.
you're listening to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno on WOON 1240 AM and 99.5 FM in New England's beautiful Blackstone River Valley. We'll be right back with Earl Grey Anderson.
Hello, I'm Monique Charette Weekly, calling all classmates of Woonsocket High School class of 1978. Come help us celebrate our 45th reunion at Bella's Restaurant, Friday, September 15th from 5 to 10. Looking forward to sharing memories and making new ones. Please call Linda at 401-766-3134. Also our Facebook page at Woonsocket High School, class of 1978. Hope to see you there.
Local and live at 99.5 FM.
Hello and welcome back to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno, coming to you from WOON, AM, and FM here in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, here this beautiful August day right here on the corner of Park Ave and Kennedy Street. And we have Earl Grey Anderson with us, and we're going to hop into some very interesting cases that I did not need to take a break for him to prepare. Apparently he was prepared. So, but take it away, Earl.
I was a Boy Scout for a minute. You know, you're always supposed to be prepared.
That's true. Almost like a child version of Semper Fi.
Yes.
Or Zipper Parada's Coast Guard.
Gary, well, speaking of Semper Fi, so this was a case I had that was just a Marine to the core. I mean, I spoke with his wife, with his whole family, really, because they lived with him the aftermath of what he had gone through. And they said, well, Dad has PTSD, but not from going to Vietnam. He was an older veteran. He'd actually been to Vietnam. But this had happened back in 1968. That he was on he was on leave. It was, you know, his weekend. He went to a party and they brought out a Ouija board, and this scared him. He had a background in Christianity, and he didn't do such things. So he left the party. He's kind of, the guy referred to himself as kind of a motorhead, that he had a hot rod that he'd kind of souped up that he was very proud of. He was driving back to the base when he saw something in the sky. He was wondering what the heck this was, and it just looked like this fireball with electricity. Suddenly, the dashboard of his car, his beloved hot rod, had this Tesla coil-like electricity running through all the controls, the dashboard and everything. He thought that it was some kind of terrible electric problem with the car. Car slowed down on its own. He couldn't start the car up again, so he got out and he popped the hood, and there was nothing wrong in there. But he heard this voice in his head that was just this, like a telepathic voice. He had never experienced this before, and it told him, "You need to go back to the base. You need to lie down. You're very tired." The guy got back in his car, and it start right up. Went back to the base. He said, my buddy asked me why I was going to bed so early. I went to bed with all my clothes on the top rack, covered myself with a blanket. Now, it was strange. As soon as I covered myself, maybe 15 later, I felt like I was pulled up and then out through the ceiling. I'm not asleep. It was the strangest sensation. It was very physical, not my mind drifting off or like that. And I wound up in something odd, like a dentist's office, except that it was all metallic and smooth. There was something that looked like a garage door, but it went sideways. It was on its side, and it opened up sideways like an accordion. I'm going to go down here, and so he heard another voice. He said, at first I thought devil, since we've been playing with the Ouija board, but later I realized it was something way beyond. The voice that I heard was telepathic, and I saw creatures that had tiny mouths like slits. They couldn't speak with their mouths. The voice was in my mind, and it said, "We have total control of your body. We can make you do whatever we need you to do." I told them, "You can't," in my own mind. When all of a sudden I lost all control of myself, I couldn't move my arms, my feet, or anything. They left me in a standing position with some kind of a restraint, and I was standing straight up. I tried to turn and see what the entity looked like, and he said, "Don't try it. Don't try and turn around." So all of a sudden it said, "We will now control your mind." So this guy was just being like treated very cruelly by these entities, and they eventually told him, "Well, we've got your mind and we're going to take your soul." And he said, "I felt like I wanted to fight. I was trying to turn my head. I could only move my eyes. The big creature who was in charge behind me, I was finally able to turn my eyes and look at him, and he looked kind of like the as you see of tall aliens, only taller." I put them in my mind, and he said that he started praying. At first, that his initial reaction was fight or flight, and he couldn't run. He was paralyzed. So he was trying to fight with them, and then that wasn't working. There was no way he could fight back. And so he started praying into kind of more of a positive kind of response. And that's when he suddenly found himself back in his barracks. He said, "I was covered in sweat, was puddled on the floor from the top of my head to the soles of my shoes. I could have been run out. I had black splotches on my body and red marks. My bunkmate didn't want to see what I looked like. My face was so contorted. He tried to keep me away from the mirror." So this guy, but after he had this initial very scary experience, he started having these dreams where they were benevolent. He was taught how to actually fly a UFO. He found himself flying over the San Diego naval base over here. You could see the ships down below. And what the heck? These guys were treating him like they were going to, destroy him, and but I think that, it was the response that he had. Maybe, I don't know if they were trying to see how he would respond, if it was just, like a test for themselves, or I kind of lean towards that they were trying to show him something about himself and anger, and the way that he responded. I have another case that came in that was a little bit more, it was more recent. It was a guy who was in the Navy. He was an aircraft carrier, and he described the exact same phenomena. And I hadn't made this case public. I mean, he didn't know any of this stuff, but he described the same thing, him going through the deck of this aircraft carrier. That it was physical, it wasn't out-of-body experience. He felt that his actual body somehow had been changed in some way, that the deck of an aircraft carrier was permeable, and he lifted right through it. He found himself in low Earth orbit with these two beings that were completely made of light. And he said that it was the most beautiful experience he ever had. But some of it didn't gel. They showed him they showed him the Pacific Rim volcanoes kind of blowing up, but the way that he reacted to it was with compassion and with tears and love for life and humanity, and saying, yes, "Is this what's going to happen, or is this like the Christmas of the ghost of Christmas future? That it's a possibility." He found himself back on the ship, pretty much the same as the Marine did. Both of these guys were very, very deeply changed by their experiences. For the naval guy, for him it was the most benevolent thing in the world. He felt grief because he his family was not there. These two beings that he met, and he hopes that he'll meet them again someday. For the Marine, there was a change that I don't even know if he knew that he'd gone through this change. But he started with anger, with wanting to fight, and he wound up somewhere better than that, with a better response, praying and feeling powerless, but giving the situation to a higher power.
Yeah, well, we've done whole shows on the beautiful aspects of this stuff, but you can call us what Mary Poppins called the kid there, extremely stubborn and suspicious, because we wonder about the trickster. Throughout human folklore is the notion of the trickster. We find that, of course, in many poltergeist cases, and the idea that whatever you're being told is what's telling you this what it appears to be? Is it truthful? Is there some kind of problem from this? What say you? How do you approach that whole issue of whether you can trust these things?
Well, there is a trickster element to it. And I think that it comes down to your own, I don't know, we all have that gauge within ourselves, I think, to where with myself, if something seems wrong, if there's sort of like actually a truly evil thing to it, and I do think that there's things in this universe that are just evil to be evil, you have to have that kind of that internal monitor, you know. And I think that it kind of depends on the person. But I do feel, though, that as you're saying, you know, this trickster thing, that it seems like this intelligence is playing with us sometimes. That's the way that I see it. I don't think that this is anything new, by the way. I'm kind of like Jacques Vallée. You know, his what was it? Passage to Magonia book is so wonderful. And I think that this phenomena has been here forever. I think that it presents itself in different manner depending on where we are, is how it presents itself to us. 1950s, we were entering the space age. It was very nuts and bolts. Things are different today. We see things a little differently than we did in the 1950s. So it presents itself in a different way now.
Yeah.
But I think it's always been here with us. It's just my personal belief. I could be wrong, you know.
No, I tend to agree.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, Jacques Vallée is a real hero to me. Matter of fact, when we interviewed him, Ben said, "Dad, it's the first time I ever saw you starstruck." But
it was a sight to behold, let me tell you.
yeah.
I'd be the same way. I you know, I had oral surgery and I got a call from Paul Hynek. He said, "Hey Earl, what are you doing?" "I'm having lunch with I'm having lunch with Jacques Vallée.
Oh,
Can you
geez.
make it?" And I was literally bleeding from my mouth. I was on pain meds and I couldn't even speak. I still had the Novocaine. It was like 2 root canals. This happened 3 months ago. And I was so heartbroken. It was like, God, I don't want to bleed on Dr. Vallée, so I'm going to have to tap out. I do it. I was heartbroken. I hope that the opportunity comes up again because I love Jacques.
I mean, hey, it's a small world. You never know.
Yeah,
That's true. So as far as a lot of cases, what led me to MUFON eventually was running into UFOs, UAPs, in what were supposed to be ghost and poltergeist cases. When William J. Hall wrote his book on that 1974 Bridgeport, Connecticut case, The World's Most Haunted House, I said, if I knew then what I think I know now, I would tell you to look around, find other houses that may be having problems, and look at the UFO reports for that area at that time. And, at that period, it was kind of
I like it.
sparse. But
That's
sure
good.
enough, he found a bunch and, corresponding. Now, what the relationship might have been, I don't know. But these 4 things I faced in that house with the family were alien beings in a broad sense of the term. I never got over that. You know,
Wow.
it was supposed to be demons. You know, that was our approach. And I was still studying for the priesthood. So,
Well, that's an easy way out, Paul. So there's that certain constituency of people now that I hear it a lot. You know, they aren't really aliens; they're demons, and it's the devil's work. And that's no, it doesn't actually. That's
no, I think it's the opposite. Because people hear about my seminary background, they say, "Oh, you must think all aliens are demons." I said, "Well, the quote-unquote demons I've run into are aliens." You know, and that's our term for something that we don't understand. It may or may not be
Yeah.
correct. But as far as being totally other, that's kind of what it was.
Right.
It is totally other. And we try to, you know, this is just something that humans do. We try to humanize stuff.
We do.
We're so anthropomorphic in the way that and anthropocentric, the way that we see everything.
We are.
But this doesn't have anything to do with humanity. I think it's pretty much an other. And this other intelligence is interacting with us, and it's communicating with us. I think it always has tried to do that.
Yeah.
But
What's
this is the way
interesting
it does
about
now.
the government approach is that we always find government interest in all areas of high strangeness, not just UAPs, UFOs. In the flap areas we're always talking about, we always find some kind of presence of the military or something that looks like the military. And to me, I think they know a lot more than they're letting on, and they would also like to research the principles involved in this interdimensionality, if that's what it is, for military and commercial use.
Mm-hmm.
Don't underestimate the interest of industry here, too. So it's all...
Because they're the only ones that have any money now, so...
Well, yeah, that could be, yeah.
I mean, the military, they have two interests. I mean, we pay them to be paranoid for us. They're doing their
True.
job. The military,
Yeah.
that's their job, is to be paranoid for us, and everything they see it through two pairs of glasses. You know, how can we weaponize this, and is this a threat? It's all threat assessment, and how can we use this to be more powerful than our enemies? Very limited, but I don't know that the military is the right folks to be ahead of investigating UFOs. So, you know, here we go. You know, it's congressional hearings talking with who? The Pentagon people in the military-industrial complex, which my mom was part of. My mom was very much part of that. And she knew UFOs were real, and she knew that they were visitors, that they had been here for a while.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you this, Earl. When it comes to what we know versus what we knew, and speaking from MUFON's point of view, do we know any more than we did in, say, 1947 with Kenneth Arnold and Roswell and all that? Do we really know any more today than we did then?
You know, that's a good question, and I think some of that we probably can't know unless there is technologies that we have been able to mimic or you know, I mean, they're talking about crash materials. I think that those are actual materials. I don't believe that we're dealing with ghosts when we're talking about aliens. I think it's very much physical. It has certain aspects that we would that we would sort of associate with ghosts and the paranormal.
Yeah,
but then
agreed.
there's the physical element to it. It's very physical. So I don't know. You know, I mean, maybe I mean, the black triangles, we see a lot of those. They always seem to be kind of cookie cutter, like they look the same. Even flying saucers, you'll see like different, you know, light schemes to them and differences, but I tend to sort of think that perhaps somebody like Lockheed Martin is pumping out the black triangles, and maybe that's our own UF there. So I kind of hope if we do have these physical crash materials, that perhaps it was like a Trojan horse thing, that they were that the crashes were purposeful, that are hoping that we can solve some of our problems and maybe get to their technological level eventually. But I think there may be a concern with us because we're way up here with our technology, but yet we're still acting like a bunch of warriors, a warrior caste.
I think
And
you're
maybe
right.
trying to change us since we're ready to enter the space age. Maybe we're not space worthy yet. We're a threat out there, and maybe that's part of what's going on. I mean, I have to keep an open mind. I never say this is what is happening unequivocally, because I don't know. I mean, in fact, I don't think I would be doing due diligence as a field investigator if I, came upon one and latched onto that and said, "This is it." Yeah. I honestly don't know. We're supposed to keep an open mind, but not so open that our brain falls out.
Right.
But with that saying that, we have to keep it very, very open, because I do believe there's an intentional absurdity that is like a signature line. If there isn't some sort of absurd thing about a case, I sometimes will even wonder if it's a hoax or not, because it's very weird. It seems like a signature line to me.
It's true. It can get really weird, and I think that is a really interesting statement, because usually usually people, when the technology thing comes up, it's like, oh, they want to help us, they want us to get to where they are. It's like a real 2001 Space Odyssey situation. But I think that's a really interesting stipulation, that sure, yeah, we have all this technology, but are we really ready for it? Yeah, that's a reoccurring theme throughout human mythology, right? Like a Prometheus type situation. We have all these things that are given to us, but can we really use it, responsibly? And arguably, I would say I don't know if we're really at that point, because there's always a dichotomy, right? There's always the people like, well, it's technology, advanced, and then there's the other side of the coin, which is morally and spiritually, right? And
Yes.
never the twain shall meet. And in this instance, I think it's important that they do, because there requires discernment in how we use our tools. Building tools for the sake of building tools is just, it's insane, right? Then you get
Sure.
situations like the atomic bomb, where it's like, well, I really shouldn't make this weapon, and then you do it anyway. And it's like, no offense to Oppenheimer, but it's like,
I got you. I absolutely agree with you. And there does seem to be some concern about our nuclear, capabilities. I mean, they've turned off ICBMs. The Malmstrom case that Bob Solis, when he was the commanding officer of an ICBM base in Montana, he watched his flying saucer was hovering over. He was down in the capsule below, in the underground part of the facility, and it was very specific. It wasn't like an electronic pulse that was sent in there by this UFO. The clock kept working. Everything that was electric, the base kind of ran on, was all working properly, but the missiles specifically, 10 of them, it was like boop, 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 boop. They're all turned off. Same thing happened over in North Dakota. David Schindley, he was the commanding officer of a similar base out there. And the same thing happened a few months later. I've spoken with both gentlemen. I've had dinner and talked, details about those two incidents. Very similar. And perhaps it is that this intelligence, it wants Star Trek and not Star Wars. We're so militaristic, and maybe it's just trying to shift that and show us the error of our ways, and showing us that if we want to be part of this community that may be interdimensional or maybe interstellar, whatever it is, that we need to change something very deeply within ourselves.
Well, one of the things that one of my favorite quotes from the late Stanton Friedman is, and he said it on this show, was we are a primitive people whose primary activity is tribal warfare. Why would they want to talk to us? Which raises the question, would they consider us, they being whoever these aliens may be, would they consider us equals in order, and why? In the sense of negotiating or guiding or whatever. Or is it the trickster aspect entering in again?
I don't know, but I would say I kind of hope that it seems like if they're taking all this trouble to interact with us, that they think that there is hope for us. I don't think this is their first rodeo. I don't think that we're the only intelligence in the universe that's gotten to this point that we have gotten to, where we can destroy ourselves or we could make life better for everyone on Earth. We have the capabilities of doing either or, but here we are, we're still acting like Genghis Khan and bloody horde of marauders, and I think perhaps they're trying to change something within our deepest souls as a species. I hope so. That's what I hope
I
the
do too.
intent is.
So tell us about yourself. Where can people find out more about you and MUFON and the ERT?
If you go to, once again, I will lead people to MUFON.com. You can go to, the ERT does have a page there, and it has a little bio on everybody in our group. We getting kind of a big ERT group. It's not a little group anymore.
No, it's a
How
great
many
group.
there's 75 or more of us now, and the cases keep coming. I mean, we're always busy. So, but MUFON.com is a good place to go. It's a good place for you to go and report your sighting or your entity encounter. And if you've been abducted or visited, that's where to go. You can find me on social media. I'm just Earl Grey on Facebook. I'm Earl Grey Anderson on Instagram, although I don't do a whole lot of stuff on there, but a little bit. I will dox myself if you want to get a hold of me personally. You can email me at earlgrayanderson@gmail.com, and that's Gray with an E and Anderson with an O.
Very good. Well, I have to tell you, Earl, it's always a pleasure and an honor to talk with you, and we'll see you at the next ERT meeting.
Fantastic. Thanks for having me, Paul, and thank you, Ben. You guys are great.
Oh, well, hey, thank you for being
Tip
with
of the
us.
spear.
Hey, it's a small world, and we enjoy having the people in that small world.
You're not going to sing that song, are you? No.
No. We would get destroyed by.
Trademark infringement.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Well, I guess speaking of trademark infringement, we should probably get to our announcements here. So if you're anywhere in or around New England, you can take in the Exeter UFO Festival. That's on Labor Day weekend, coming up in a few short weeks. That's September 2nd and 3rd. The event benefits local children's charities. And sadly, we have had to bow out this year because of my dad's health. But please go and support the event if you can. It's wonderful. The whole town gets involved. There's a dog costume contest. It's really just a wonderful event, and you can find out more about it at ExeterUFOFestival.org. And the Greater New England UFO Conference is back, and this will be a one-day event on November 4th in Leominster, Massachusetts. You can watch for more information on that. And you can visit our show website, that's BehindTheParanormal.com, where you can find nearly 1,200 hours of our regular shows and special broadcasts since 2008 from CBS Radio, Achieve Radio, and here on WOON AM and FM. You can also hear many of these broadcasts on the major podcast platforms, including Apple iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. Anywhere you find your podcasts, we will be there.
Yeah, that's kind of scary. Download our show app. It's free at BehindTheParanormal.com on that main page. You can browse our books along with those of our guest co-hosts.
Indeed. And our website has a charity page with several links to good causes that we've adopted over the years, including Hope for Hilldale Cemetery in Haverhill, Massachusetts, USA Cares, Canadian Veterans Advocacy, Helping Haiti's Orphans, the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation of America, and the Sisterhood of Ground Zero.
So what's in the crypt for next week, Ben?
Well, me being the crypt keeper this week, apparently. On August 13th, we bring you an open line show to address more of your wide and varied questions on many different paranormal subjects. And guess who's back? Shane Searway will be with us once again, and it's been a very long time since we've had him on, since he took a little hiatus not too
For a
long
very
ago.
unusual reason.
Oh, yes, and I'm sure he will fill us in on all
Yeah.
of that.
So we leave you today with a rather dark thought from our good friend and occasional guest, Whitley Strieber. The old world was destroyed because of its own greed and secretiveness. Those least evolved rose to the top. I'm Paul Eno.
And I'm Ben Eno, and thanks for joining us on our great cosmic journey, and we shall see you next time on Behind the Paranormal.
Return to this radio frequency, 167